You are listening to Nebraska on Tap. This podcast will tap you into the Natural Resources District, managing Nebraska's water since 1972. Whether you are a farmer, rancher, or citizen of Nebraska, this podcast was made for you. Time to tap into this week's episode. This podcast is hosted by Heather Dismang and brought to you by the Middle Republican Natural Resources District.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's edition of Nebraska on Tap. This week, my guest is a soil health expert. He has a lab up in Pleasanton, Nebraska, and he is Lance Gunderson. He's going to talk to us about soil testing and management plans that he helps provide up at his lab in Pleasanton. I know farmers and ranchers are very well versed in testing the soil your crops and grass grow in, to water testing, the stock testing, all of that stuff. I brought him on so he could talk to us a little bit more about what he provides. I attended a soil education day at Central Community College that was hosted by Sarah Stevenson there in Holdridge last year. So let's get into that interview that I had with Lance.
My name is Lance Gunderson. I am the president and co-founder of ReGen Ag Lab. We are a laboratory centered in Pleasanton, Nebraska. We focus primarily on helping farmers that either are looking to transition or have already transitioned kind of down the soil health and regenerative ag path. And so a lot of our testing services that we provide are aimed at helping farmers, getting them data to help them make decisions and identify problem areas and identify areas that are working really well, and then how we can help influence those things through management.
Why is it important to test soil as a farmer or a small urban farm?
A number of reasons to test soil, primarily in agriculture. Through the first 50 or 60 years of soil testing, the primary reason for testing soil was to look at soil fertility numbers, to understand if your soil had the right nutrients, the proper balance of those nutrients, if it could meet the needs of the crops that you were intending to grow, primarily focused in production. So now, more recently, there's been a shift in soil testing to where those things are still important. We're all still in an ag production, no matter the size, right? If you're gardening, you're doing it to produce food for yourself and maybe your friends and family. But we're understanding more about the role of soil biology, soil chemistry, so the nutrients and the fertility that were being tested before, certainly how the biology influences soil physical properties, such as aggregation, and which leads to water infiltration and things like that. So the importance of soil testing now, in the idea, I guess the vision of how we are doing it, is to try to give you a more well-rounded picture what your soil ecosystem is like and how it's functioning. Where before we were just measuring phosphate or nitrate and potassium and saying, well, you need to put more of this on. In some cases, putting more in is not going to give you the desired result you hope for, because the system itself is not functioning properly.
And that comes from the microorganisms, right, that are in the soil?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm an analogy person, and so when we think about human health and, more importantly, gut health, they talk about the soil microbiome of your gut being responsible for nutrient transport into your body, obviously digestion, and even your mood and your hormones and how well you sleep and all of those things. It's kind of amazing. But the soil is the gut of the ag production system. And so as farmers, we put things into the gut, whether that's the seeds or the fertilizer or the manure or whatever it may be. The microbes are responsible for then breaking that down and translocating it throughout the system, and they do so with help of the plant. The plant is providing those microbes energy through sunlight, photosynthesis. They put energy down into the soil through the root system, and in return, the microbes are protecting the plant. They are feeding the plant nutrients, etc. And so in science, we call that a positive feedback loop, or in other words, you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. So the microbes are the workforce of the system. They deliver huge amounts. The vast majority of the nutrients that end up in the plant come through the microbiome or through the gut first.
What are some of your victory stories on people's fields or productions that you've helped with getting their soil back up to par so they can have better crops?
I'll start by saying this. Look, transition is hard, and not every story starts with a home run and success. I mean, I just want to throw that out there. I don't want everybody to think that, oh, if we do this, everything's going to be great. You know, we're going to have the largest production we've ever seen. It's going to be fantastic. No, there's a little bit of discomfort. Just like in your gut, you change your diet dramatically and you've got a little discomfort for a while. But countless times we see producers that are willing to implement some of the soil health principles. Doesn't mean that they all have to be implemented at once. It doesn't mean they even all have to be implemented in total. And it's not even a question of do you use fertilizer or not. This isn't a conventional versus organic discussion. But we've got countless producers in Nebraska, I'll focus there, that have shown dramatic reductions in nitrogen application through the use of cover crops, diverse rotations, minimal tillage, doing it maybe to terminate a cover crop or seed a cover crop, but staying away from some of that. And we've seen soil respirations increase dramatically, which is a measure of microbial life. We've seen better water infiltration, drought resilience, and all of those things can lead to better producing crops. The one thing I'll mention is that where some of these growers are increasing production, it's increasing production per unit cost. So what I mean by that is that if the farm average was 250 bushels of corn, or you're growing tomatoes in your backyard and you're saying, I plant 5 plants and this is kind of the typical yield of tomatoes I get. Well, what we're seeing is you might still get the same yield, but you're spending a lot less money on the inputs to prop up those crops. And so you're getting 250 bushel corn, but you spent money to what you would raise 200 bushel or 160 bushel corn in a conventional set. And so large growers in north central Nebraska, around 4,000 acres, have done wonderful management practices over the last 10 years. They were very adamant on the one thing they didn't want to change was reducing nitrogen application rates. Some of the data that we provided them showed them that they very realistically could do this. And so they did on an 80-acre field split into multiple plots. They applied different application rates, and they got the same yield across the field completely. And so the next year they did it again, and they added more application different rates in and even restricted even more. Again, across all the replicated plots, got the same yield. I mean, plus or minus 2 or 3 bushels. They're now believing we can do this. We've built the system up. We've made this go. And like I said, we could spend 10 hours talking about success stories from 30,000 acre farms and ranches all the way down to, 10 by 10 garden plots in the backyard to everything in between. But that's the one that really comes to mind. It's been fairly dramatic, and it's right here in Nebraska.
Yeah, and you have your PhD in this. So tell us, Lance, how did you become so passionate about soil and regenerative ag and helping others grow great crops?
Yeah, I walked into this through the back door. I was an aspiring marine biologist from south central Nebraska, about as far away from the ocean as you could possibly get. I had a passion for sharks. I had a professor tell me during undergrad, he said, "You realize that there's no sharks in the Platte River." We laughed, and I said, "Yeah, I do." But obviously, growing up in central Nebraska, I grew up around ag. I'm not from a family farm, but I worked on farms, family friends. I saw their dedication. I saw how much they cared. I wanted some lab experience, and so I took a job working in a laboratory in central Nebraska in soils and feeds, and I always knew that I wanted to do more education-wise. So when I went back and did my master's degree, I had the opportunity to kind of develop a test and implement a test into the laboratory that was looking at soil microbiology. And really, my passion came from the growers. I was doing that project to complete a degree and then move on. But through that project, I had an opportunity to talk to so many farmers and to hear their stories. And they would tell me about the history of their farm and the struggles they're seeing, their successes, and what direction they wanted to go. And I really loved that opportunity, and it kind of lit a fire in me to say, hey, we can help. Like, we should, as an industry, we should be helping you.
Yeah.
Yes, we run a business, but we're trying to help people rather than just sell them an idea or a product or something like that to perpetuate the same system. So in some cases, yeah, we're able to help and solve problems, but it's a very complex system.
Right. And it sounds like it needs some teamwork with the farmer or the landowner as well,
absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely. Yeah, because, I'm always flattered when somebody says, you're the expert. Well, I know some things, but when it comes to your farm and your operation, you are the expert. It not me or the agronomist or anybody else. So it takes putting those two quote unquote experts together and pulling in 3 or 4 more and looking at this from different angles and working with the growers, because the growers have more intimate knowledge of their farm. It is their farm. And we keep that in the forefront of our mind to say, what are your goals? What do you want to do with your farm? Are you preparing to leave it for your family? Are you wanting to transition to this type of a system? Do you want livestock or don't want livestock? So all of those pieces of information come in with the soil data, and then decisions are made by the producers just with that guidance and discussion.
Right. You're kind of like their shaman. You help them along that journey as a professional.
Yeah, we offer insights and try to answer questions, but at the end of the day, we're just trying to support the people that want to make a change and don't necessarily know where to start.
Right. And if people want to contact you to work with them to help out with their needs or give them some guidance through testing with you, how do they do that?
The easiest way to do that is to reach out through our website at customer service at regenagrab.com. It's a really simple process, but just to reach out and say, hey, I'm interested, I have some questions. We've got about 5 different people that monitor that email and we'll reply back, and depending on your questions, it'll be who jumps in to answer that. Beyond that, it's very simple. We receive soil samples and we create a customer account for that individual, and we have all the sampling instructions and the submittal forms and everything on our website. If a more detailed discussion is needed, kind of how do we set this up? This is what I'm doing on the farm, how do I sample this? They can, by all means, call the office number, have a conversation with myself or Emily about that.
Well, I'm glad that the coastal states didn't get you and you stayed in Nebraska to be able to help all the other Nebraskans out.
Yes, we wouldn't have it any other way.
Well, thank you so much for your time today, Lance. I really appreciate it, and I hope that people look you up, grab your knowledge, and get some help on some soil if they need it.
Yes, thank you so much for the opportunity, Heather. We really appreciate it.
All right, thanks again, Lance. And again, that is up in Pleasanton at ReGen Labs that he owns. And I hope everybody found that pretty interesting. Of course, I couldn't let him spill all the beans because you're going to need to have your soil tested and sampled and get all those results back before he could even help you out personally. But it's definitely something to think about, especially if you want to start growing food for any community event, or if there's schools out there who want to start growing food. Or if you're a farmer or rancher who just wants some more personalized assistance when it comes to your soil health. Anyway, you can always find us on our RSS feed, NebraskaOnTap.com. You can also find us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, but on Facebook we're under the Middle Republican NRD. You can even get us on TikTok. You can also find us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. So I hope everybody has a great week, and we look forward to talking with somebody else next week for you guys to listen in on. So thank you for continuing to tune in and supporting Nebraska on Tap. We'll talk to you later. Have a good one. Bye-bye.